Dear colleagues, dear friends, dear participants to this conference, I'm especially honored to be able to deliver today to you a special lecture associated to the prize that the Japanese Society of Political Economy generously granted to me in collaboration with Rouglé. I'm speaking to you from Paris, and we are today living a very impressive day where the case of coronavirus has been doubling with respect to the previous week. Therefore, my line of analysis will be the following. What does the regulation methodology tell us about this very strange phenomenon? A reason for adopting this vision is that de facto regulation theory has been devoted to the study of crisis. And in a sense, the book just published in October 1st by Éditions La Découverte in Paris is named, once I translate it, Capitalism in Facing the Pandemic. Why regulation theory is well equipped for this endeavor? Because the charm of the methodology is that we develop concepts, tools, modeling that are permanently to be recomposed in order to respond to the challenge posed by a very specific historical juncture. Under this respect, uh, all the approach of regulation theory has been formed by observing and analyzing the succession of crises, the interwar crisis, the 73 crisis of the previous century, where we are the structural crisis of Fordism. We also studied the internet bubble and the 2000 crisis, and of course, the last achievement of regulation theory had been to provide nearly in real time an analysis of the great American financial crisis of 2008. And today, we will deploy the concepts and tools in order to understand the problem. Third specificity of my presentation, maybe economics should not be only dealing with economy, but should deal about the links between various spheres of economic activity. And the COVID-19 raised a very definite question. What were in the past the role of pandemia in the dynamism of economic and institutional change? Last ambition of this presentation and this book, uh, theoreticians only try to theorize decades after events of great complexity. The bet of regulationists is that we try to provide a real-time analysis uh, when we should be imagining that we are following the arrow of time and following the various processes that have been triggered by the COVID. And if you look at the structure of the book, what is very impressive, at the extreme left column, you have the chronology. And at each step of this element, of this COVID crisis, we are mobilizing taxonomy of past crises, um, a review of the role of pandemics in the dynamics of profit and real wage. We revisit the question of risk versus radical innovation. Then we go back to a very old theme of regulation, the so-called anthropogenic model. Maybe the time is right for admitting that the core objective of a wealthy society is to deliver good education, good health, and a very rich culture in order to try to solve the emerging social and political problems. Then what I will try to do is to mobilize a little bit the research of the last decade, where I've been studying the emergence of transnational platform capitalism as well as state capitalism. They are the titles of two of my most recent papers. And I will try to argue that de facto, but very surprising, the COVID-19 is accelerating the past trend, not stopping them, contrary to what was observed during traditional growth. I will not develop the question of international relation and euro because it would be too long, but I will develop the question in conclusion. Institutionalists of any obedience have a major endeavor try to understand how, having stopped totally an economy, how to construct again the trust and the coherence of forms that would allow to recover and deliver a totally new regime. A fifth feature of the regulation theory is that it is an eclectic one. There is not a single theory. For example, society are not only economy, but they are healthcare, they are society, they are the political sphere. Similarly, I will mobilize a very important concept of regulation theory, is the concept of institutional hierarchy. It is very here, institutions are not equal. In finance trade regime, it was finance. In the 40s, it was the wage labor nexus. And today, my bet is that the emerging regime should be devoted to preserving public health via sophisticated organization of the healthcare system. And I will not follow, but for example, I will develop the question of irreversibility. When you don't know what the future is made of, you innovate, you try to develop strategy, and step by step, you do create a form of irreversibility. It was a title of my book of collected writing on this issue. And with the COVID, each country has been selecting a special strategy, and now it is very difficult to copy or to converge towards the same strategy because you have a built-in hysteresis and back dependency that has been used. Similarly, why to use network theory? Because when you're looking at the model of diffusion of the COVID-19, their weakness, their common weakness is that they do not take into account the specificity of urban and rural network. The more intense the network, the quicker is the spreading of the virus. So, you have a very new tool that has to be understood. And last but not least, young people in research and analysis do dig the question of what are the relations between ecology and economy. It will be a very important. And then I will follow and develop 7 teachings of my analysis with regulation. The first one is that anybody has been tempted to compare the 2020 with 29 of the previous. I think this is a total mistake. And let me try to explain why. In some of other students of the crisis think, oh, this is no more than the repetition of the 2008 crisis. Follow this line. In this case, the stock market bubble was self-defeating and was a mechanism in which the crisis was endogenous. The very mechanism of speculation was creating the collapse, and then you had state intervention. If you are looking carefully at the current situation, or most of the problems come from the fact that many governments try to stop economic activity in terms of real estate, car construction, transport, aviation, non-food trade, personal services. So, in a sense, you have a very, instead of having a cumulative recession, you have a brutal decline of production by administrative behavior. And therefore, but I will not develop so much the difference. Subprime was an endogenous crisis generated by finance, economy, state intervention. COVID is totally different. You go virus, public decision, financial crisis, and the ongoing financial crisis. Therefore, a little bit of semantics. Many sophisticated economists are thinking about the 2020 recession. Look at this evolution, the rate of growth of world GDP in real terms, of course. A recession is this mild movement. You can recognize, for example, the internet bubble. You can recognize the 2008. And then you have a recovery. Observe the verticality of the drop in the GDP in volume. Similarly, many people are thinking, oh, we are back to 29. No, graphically, this photo do show that in the first case, you do observe the fact that people unemployed are queuing in order to get free food. In the case of this crisis, you have Americans driving wonderful cars are queuing in order to be tested for the presence of not of COVID. In a sense, you understand we are in a totally different world. Survival pressure on one side, a threat of mortality due to COVID, and the queue is not about food. It is about the lack of testing for every American to be raised. And again, you see crises are following one after another, but they are not at all the same. Let's go back to US, and again you have GDP in volume, rate of growth. First, remember you have competitive regulation, very unstable fluctuation of accumulation. Then you have the wonderful stabilization of the 40s, Keynesian and Beveridgean days, and of course you have the slow exhaustion of growth. It was so-called convergence toward secular stagnation, and again the brutal interruption by congelation of the economic activity. Yeah, so it is very important to understand this difference. Now this was the first result. And the competitive advantage of regulation is we only know one type of crisis, but as you know, we have a world taxonomy, and the COVID-19 is adding on. Let me mention now the second result. We have to revisit, after all, what do we know about the role of pandemic in the dynamic, the long-term dynamic of capitalist economy. Again, the reference to history is very important because you do observe that since the 14th century, you had 14 pandemics that have been killing more than 100,000 people. And the very amazing fact is that some pandemics are only lasting 1 year, for example, H1N1, but some have been lasting 20 years. So the big thing is that a pandemic is not an instantaneous shock. It is a process of spreading of this virus or bacteria that can last for decades, which immediately, if the government had knew this fact, it was very irrational to think that the crisis will be over easily because, on the contrary. Second result, you find some commonality in the present crisis of COVID with previous one, because in crisis you have 4 actors here mentioned. First, of course, you have doctors and scientists. They try to find methods in order to fight against the diffusion of the pandemic. For example, they invent quarantine, the fact that people have to stay at home. They try various medicines. But immediately you have merchants that when blocked by confinement measure, think that the economy will be collapsed, and the consequence on health of the collapse of the standard of living will be worse than the fight against the pandemic. And it is very interesting, for example, in Genova in the 14th century, merchants have been complaining against the government for imposing imposing a too restrictive measure of containment of the pandemic. And of course, the political power has to justify itself. And very frequently, Donald Trump is not the only one to blame Chinese virus, but in other pandemia, it was the migrant workers, it was the rich. And last but not least, religion. Most of religious people have been involved, but God has been in fury against mankind for malmanagement of the planet, for instance. And you have the idea that this is the consequence of the anger of God. And what is very impressive, this configuration is in a sense reactivated with the COVID-19. Interesting indeed. And the third sub-result is the following. It is not a short-term shock. If you try to run sophisticated but somehow fragile economic study, the study by this author, by Jordan, do show that the adverse impact on real wage of typical pandemia can last for 40 years. And it is especially important for countries like Italy, like Spain, and observe that again, you have a strong national defense. Germany have been faring quite immune for massive upwards and downwards. And France, again, is in between Southern Europe and Northern Europe. So, interesting enough, pandemia, since they last long, some of them, as I mentioned, 20 years, do affect in the long run. And most of the case, in this case, it is a kind of Malthusian model. Mortality is such that laborers get a new marketing power that is converted in the fact that in the long run, you have a change in the natural rate of growth of growth. Then the fourth result of this ending of pandemic is very interesting. Let's go to the country like Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, who were very nearby the SARS epidemic. They derived from this very painful lesson, because the mortality in this country were very high, that you should try to build institution and strategy, especially an epidemic control organization, which will gather all the relevant information, take the decision, organize testing, tracing, isolation, and manage the strategy to overcome and minimize the consequence of the virus. And if you look carefully, having invested in institutions against pandemic, these countries have been able to remarkably lower the rate of the mortality rate. It is totally opposed when I go to United States and United Kingdom. The politicians were so proud of the dynamism of their medical sector that they took no notice of the H1N1 of the SARS pandemic, and they were totally amazed, totally disarmed by the surge of the COVID. By parenthesis, it is the same thing for financial crisis. The Asian crisis of 97 in Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong was so severe that they decided to put brakes to the brutal inflow and brutal outflow, sudden stop of foreign direct of financial capital. They were faring very well in the 2008 crisis. Let's go to Brazil or Argentina. They take no notice of the severity of the crisis. Therefore, last year again, Argentina got the same financial crisis because no any institution in Argentina had taken into account the risk of the repetition. Therefore, the teaching is very important. What is the most important institution to fight against pandemic? The preparation by the lesson of the previous pandemic in order to deploy ex ante all the strategy, all the management in order to deal with the next one. You understand? And therefore, you see, an important phenomenon. You have same virus at the world level, but very different strategy. For example, the crisis is much more severe in France than in Germany, and nevertheless, we belong to the same European Union. So clearly, since you have uncertainty about the nature of the virus, you take decisions. Some of them are good, some of them are worse, and you have diverging trajectory within the same world economy. A fifth and last important result is about inequality. Since Thomas Piketty, economists are used to focus their analysis upon income and wealth inequality. This is very important because we are in capitalist economy. But what is very revealing in the COVID-19 virus diffusion is that de facto you have the summing up of four sorts of inequality. First, education. Some people have very good education, wide competence, they work in high value added sectors, whereas low-skilled workers have been obliged during the pandemic to become to deliver pizza from one restaurant to one home. So whereas the high engineers have been working at home via Zoom or any other software. Second difference, according to your level of education, you get access to very different employment contracts. If you are very talented, you can get a long-term duration labor contract. If you are low skilled, you only get a transitory, limited in time contract. And therefore, when the unemployment and the stopping of the economy come, you lay off or you discharge most of the unskilled, which is a second inequality adding to the education. Then you have urbanism. Let's imagine I go to poor India, and poor Indian live in slums where 20 people live in a 10 square meter apartment. By definition, the speed of diffusion will be tremendous because they don't have the ability to have physical distancing. So, and of course, the income is an important factor in the choice of location of apartment. And last but not least, some rich people have a very large insurance coverage, whereas, let's go to the US, you have at least 45 million of Americans uninsured, and they only go to hospital to die because they don't have any coverage. And as you have noticed, the mortality rate of due to COVID has been extremely skewed in favor of underprivileged class. You see, one of my main motto, COVID is revealing all the structure of contemporary economy and society, including the question of inequality. And you understand why the way out of the crisis are so difficult, because you have to overcome all these sources of inequality. Let me turn to the third result. Conventional theory is considering only risk. What is to say? People and learning the basic mechanism in which they are involved. And they are only surprised by shocks coming from outside. But they know so well the functioning of the economy, and this model is supposed to be structurally stable. Therefore, the risk is only a transitory phenomenon before rejoining a given long-term equilibrium. You will have recognized the dynamic general stochastic equilibrium models, very famous things for the And in this direction, COVID brings the question of radical uncertainty, and I will develop the devastating consequence for orthodox theory. De facto, even now, I will update this diagram was made nearly June 2000, but I will update. We don't know now when and if we get vaccine. We don't know if immunity provided by vaccine will last 1 month, 6 months, or 5 years. And imagine it changes a lot. We don't know if international community will be able to finance the buying and the diffusion of the vaccine all over the world, because since the virus is at the world level, in order to eradicate the pandemic, you need to have a full coverage of health security at the world level. Imagine this radical uncertainty, in spite of the fact after 1 week, the biologists have been of the world have been able to diagnose the DNA of this COVID. They have been collaborating intensively in detecting all the properties, but biology is not an exact science. Each virus is a challenge to the knowledge of the biologists. Therefore, it was very difficult for government to react, because there are no theory in order to understand what will be the normal profile of M. Now, with the panic of yesterday night in France, the governments are in complete disarray, because quasi nobody had expected such a rapid second wave. Therefore, traditionally, orthodox theory saying financial markets are socializing the vision of the future. This is totally false when you have radical uncertainty. And here I want to play a tribute to a wonderful model by my friend André Orléans, who published in 2019, this following model. You are a trader, a bond, which can have a negative value or a positive value. And each of the traders has to imagine to propose a price. Imagine you have a very low volatility, you have very low risk, everybody is pulling, and then the law of large number is such that you have a wonderful Gaussian curve in which the probability is exactly centered to the long-term value, that is zero in this case. Imagine that I introduce noise, and some actors do realize that their price does not fit with the price of the market. Therefore, they think maybe other traders have an information better than I. Therefore, I will downplay my own valuation, and I will put more weight in the valuation by the market. This is increasing dispersion. So you have a kind of very wide, you have large disparity of the evolution. So you have clearly more volatility. But the charm of this model is the following. You have a threshold in the sense that I'm so uncertain about my own assessment of the value of the bond that you will have the polarization of two equilibrium, totally pessimistic traders or totally optimistic. And this is very interesting, because it is exactly what is happening on an everyday basis with the COVID. And at one extreme, you shift from one day to another, from dark pessimism to totally naive pessimism. This is very enlightening for understanding the dynamic of stock market. Stock market is moved since March, the mid-March, by two news. The news from the health front: do we have a vaccine? Do we have a low capacity of resuscitation in hospital and so on? And second, what are the plan of the state in order to compensate the loss? When you have a bad news, then you have a drastic collapse of the stock market, especially in the healthcare value. Then imagine you have an announcement of strengthening hospital number of beds. Then you get an upward movement. But how? Badly. You have more mortality. Again, downward movement. You announce an industrial plan to manufacture reanimator, mask, and so on. You have again an upward movement. And these things, we are only this vision of alternative movements, of pessimism due to the permanence of the virus, and compensation by the states that are compensating the drastic loss of most economic actors, especially the firms or even the household via part-time financing. So why? Because the market, the financiers are unable to find out the fundamental value. Nobody knows the fundamental value because the process of fighting against the virus is still being struggled. There is not ex-ante equilibrium waiting for the society. It will be the consequence of the strategic interaction of the various actors. And this is very important in terms of speculative moves, in the sense that the stock market are very ambitious and impassioned. As soon as one company is announcing, for example, a good medicine, then you have a boom in the stock market. But if you look at the process of discovery of new medicine, vaccine, and so on, this process used to take 5, 6, or 7 years. And even if it is anticipated to be reduced, you have a conflict of temporality between the impatience of financiers and the painful process of finding new medicine and new vaccine. So again, you see how finance is blocking a deep and profound reflection about the issue of state. And in this context, my interpretation, why do states come back anywhere in the US with 2 trillion reflation plan, in European community with 1.8 trillion euro plan, and so on? Because if the state is not advancing first insurance of last resort and a perspective, a calendar for the fight against the virus, no private economic agent is able to make a private evaluation of the profitability of any investment. In a sense, the state becomes the focal point, in order to use the term of Thomas Schelling, where all the actors are lost by radical uncertainty, look at the state with the hope to have a coordinating mechanism. And as you realize, this is a major contribution to institutional economics. Because I want to pay tribute to Masahiko Aoki. What are institutions? Among others, they reduce uncertainty by polarizing collective expectation of having. And you see how much we learn by the COVID. Let me now address to the 4th result. I'm a little late, sorry. Because here governments are now very blamed by all public opinion, especially in France. So you have a rebellion against the state. They did all badly. Careful. Here I will analyze for you why it is a little bit unjust, but confusion in the minds implies fallacy in the economic policy. And a good example is this one. When you look carefully, the plan decided all over the world, you have 3 objectives, and they are totally confused. The first one, to prevent a liquidity crisis. If the firms are unable to reimburse credit, they go bankrupt. So an element is very simple: credit guaranteed by state or deferral of payment. This is a clear method. But maybe, for example, some airline company can be definitely bankrupt, because in the long term, the rate of growth of international travel will be very low. Therefore, you have a question of solvency. Some firms can no more exist in the post-COVID. And then we have totally different mechanisms. Some of them being, for example, permanent subsidy by the state, or transformation of credit, state credit, into equities of firms. So that is totally different mechanism. Last, you have to preserve the capacity, productive capacity, and the sources of growth, which is, you have to continue to innovate. You have to subsidize parts of the world in order to keep, for example, the competence of the workers in the aircraft construction, because this stability of the competence is a condition for long-run recovery of the manufacturing company. And the first difficulty in the first plan, government have been mixing everywhere. And when you have massive intervention, 2 trillion euro or dollar, they are considering three things: simply credit, abstract guarantee, forecasted capital buying, and so on. So it was totally confused. This large sum, had no significance at all, which is very bad. It was simply to impress public opinion. Then you have a very strong contradiction that is permeating and is destroying the credibility of government. In the first phase of the confinement, the government simultaneously said, stay at home, but simultaneously, please, workers in agriculture sector, in distribution, in transport, in healthcare, please go to work because it is precisely very difficult. But since workers was failing to catch up the virus, they were very reluctant to go to work. And therefore, you had a very contradictory mechanism in the sense that the fear created in order to convince people to stay home was having an adverse impact on the ability and the disponibility of workers to go to work with the risk of catching up the virus. First, big contradiction, and this contradiction is still present today. The priority is to go to work, but the consequence has been that people now are catching the virus when going at work. Third, the contradiction is now very clear. You have a dualistic contradiction. This appeared around May. I initially, given the risk of thousand fatalities, deaths, or some of the people were expecting millions of deaths in some countries. Clearly, the objective was to minimize the number of deceased due to the COVID. As confinement has been contracting total production and value added, then the government have to take into account that I have to minimize the economic losses because I need economic activity in order to finance back the spending in order to sustain the fight against the coronavirus. And therefore, you have a kind of a form of schizophrenia. The government simultaneously say, oh yes, the public health is our priority, but oh please, economic recovery is also a priority. You cannot have two priorities. You have to select. In the first phase, you have been preferring health security. Now you have preferred economic prosperity. But the consequence has been an upsurge again of the virus because we have been removing all the constraints preventing the mobility of the virus. But the contradiction as a step further, during confinement was invented in China. As you know, China is a very authoritarian, very highly controlled by numerical techniques and so on. So you could compatibilize a quick fight after some mismanagement in the very beginning of the pandemic. You have now a very relatively good control in continental China virus, and what is very important, you have a recovery for this year. You will have a positive growth of China. The cost has been the acceptance of terrific restriction to human liberty. So, and if you prefer, for example, let's go to the Trump strategy or the Boris Johnson strategy in the early beginning. They have been deciding to preserve the economic production and to respect citizens. You have an upsurge, incredible upsurge of the virus. So you are making compatible freedom of mobility, freedom of property. Firms can open. You have done a form of economic dynamism, but the cost in terms of death is enormous in the case of US. US, the rate of mortality per inhabitant is very mediocre in US, in spite of the very sophisticated advance of US in terms of medicine. Therefore, what is the way out of the crisis? it is clearly a method in order to synchronize again uh, the progress in the fight against malaria and the progressive recovery in the economic term. My favorite motto is from Chancellor Angela Merkel from Germany. When asked by journalists, what is your strategy? My agenda is strictly determined by the progress of the struggles against COVID-19. And in this diagram, I inspired by the first phase. Imagine I can open new beds for resuscitation. Then you have a better conscience of people. You launch an industrial plan in order to provide masks and test products in such a way that you try to download the loss of capability of the hospital progressively by joining victory on the virus and economic recovery, the return of trust, in the sense that when you fight and succeed in quasi-efficacy, you can have a recovery. And this is the case, for example, of China. Finally, the first victory has been on public health. It has been converted into economic recovery. And this is, and therefore we have the theme I've been presenting in the introduction, a new hierarchy in temporality. And this is the diagram. Before COVID, the time of the economy was time of finance, micro or nanosecond, imposed on governments, imposed on firms, and the poor workers and healthcare was totally dominated by cost saving in order to reply to the desire and the strong requirements of financial markets. Whereas now, you have the fact that we have to produce the vaccine or the cure that will take months, quarter of years, and then you will build back trust for public opinion, for mobility, for reopening services to people, to recover in the term of long-term perspective for investment, and then you will have a long-term recovery of the financial market. So you understand that the time of the pandemic is structuring the time of economic policy decision, and this decision in turn are orienting a long-lasting recovery of the financial market. And you understand again how useful is the concept of hierarchical, institutional hierarchy among HFOs and the related hierarchy in the term of temporality. This was a very important feature. If I stop here, what should be the prognosis? I could nearly stop here and recall you that when I was invited for the very first time in Japan back in the 90s, I made a speech inspired by the idea of Bruno Terre about the anthropological model was the future of Japan. And let me take again this element. If you take logically the structural weakness of quite whole society, it was the healthcare system. Therefore, the new regime should absolutely incorporate this element. And if you extend this requirement to education and to culture, it is exactly the production of mankind by work, what is to say, by education, you train competence, ability, citizenship. By good health, you preserve well-being and capacity to innovate. And with culture, you build social solidarity, what permits to innovation to prosper and to deliberate and find out compromise. Let's review rapidly this argument. If you look back at the history of medicine, everything is up to new disease. New disease are new challenges. You have technological breakthrough from doctors for epidemiologists. They are costly. Therefore, you have to invent new forms of care system. And in a sense, you have a co-evolution between new disease, innovations in terms of organization of welfare and general economic dynamics. So it is in this perspective, health is not an appendix of the economic evolution. It is an intrinsic part of the long-term evolution of modern society. And in a sense, you have a co-evolution of rising standard of living and rising life expectancy at birth. So it is not an accident, it is the very functioning of the technical change, both in medicine and in the economy. Here I go to my favorite country of regulationists after Michel Aguilera. It is US. Here in this diagram, you get in dotted line the share of the GDP linked to the consumer buying houseware, equipment of the house, the cars, motors, and so on. All the for this good. As you see, after Second World War, you had 14% of the was devoted to for this good, were structuring social life. What is the black line? The black line is the part of the GDP in US that is devoted both to education and to health. And as you see, it is climbing to the moon. And if I can prolong this to this year, it will be nearly 19% of GDP. So silenciously, in the US, you had an anthropogenic model, but nobody is noticing because it is so unequal that de facto poor people do not benefit from these advances. If I can recapitulate this evolution in this table, you are starting from the 70s. In the very beginning, you have the Fordist growth regime. The engine of growth was clearly the deepening of division of labor and technical progress implying productivity, labor productivity. Regulationists have been thinking that the model is now in US finance-led, and de facto, you see that finance has been overturning in importance the role of manufacturing. But the finding of the regulationists is that de facto, the real engine of growth is de facto the health care, education, and culture. It is the anthropogenic model which is, but it is not recognized by theoreticians. They are obsessed by productivity in the Fordist model, wealth management in the case, whereas the name of the game of the anthropogenic model is welfare of the general population. You understand? In a capitalist country, this is not at all the core objective. The core objective is profit making, either by manufacturing or by speculating and inventing new products. And here is a special tribute to Japan, because if you compare the spread of this anthropogenic model between US and China and Japan, you are amazed to see how advanced in Japan. Japan has been a forerunner, not only of zero interest rate central bank policy, but also of the diffusion of the fact that you are spending for health, you are spending for education, you do take into account that urban population need special public health measures, such as wearing masks when you have the seasonal flu, and you have clearly education is a major contribution to the ability to manage his own health. And of course, you have, due to a relatively homogeneous culture, you have far less violence than in the US. So in a sense, Japan has been anticipating this anthropological model, which was supposed in most of the research study be the typical feature of social democratic countries. And here is the theorizing, which is very important. Can this model function? Most of statistical economists will say no, because it is not creating value. This is false, because if you go, for example, to countries such as Denmark, Sweden, you find the following sequence. First, everything is up to education. in widely diffused education, inclusive education, how to solve problems, how to force not only citizens, but very component of knowledge workers. Then, of course, you need to nurture all along the life cycle this competence. So, for example, capitalism implies obsolescence of the knowledge of the people. You need permanently to have a vocational training system. And again, Denmark is a core example, of this flexibility. And of course, if you have a good wealth, you have a large, old people can work longer with pleasure. You have less absentees, but you have less suicide and so on. So the, 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 the ability to solve the question of stress concerning social life or private health are very important. These four elements are preconditions for well-being and competence of the population. If so, you have a very dynamic and mobile society because people are endowed with capability to take the term of Amartya Sen, in according which they can prosper even if the turmoil of capitalist competition. Then you can have employment in dynamic sector creating high value added. This high value added can be taxed in order to pay the very costly service of free education until the university, very good retraining system, and wonderful health system. So again, in this perfect model, so you have a completely aggiornamento of a capitalist economy, in the sense welfare is the core objective and capitalist profit making is the mean in order to fulfill this model. If I were naive, I would wish that the 21st century will be the anthropogenetic model. Unfortunately, and of course, positively in this sense, COVID-19 is accelerating this reception, the fact health is a precondition for economic prosperity. I will not go into detail this too long, but there it could be a test for the government to realize if I do not invest sufficiently in healthcare, I will bankrupt in the long run the viability. My caveat, and it is an important one, is what are the political alliance in favor of this model? And this is not so sure. Because this model can be exclusionary and unequal in the United States, and it can be integrative and egalitarian in Scandinavian social democratic countries. So the element that is important, if inequality is a normal feature of a capitalist society, this model can be detrimental to the long-run viability and legitimacy of government. Second concern, very severe, with the mass unemployment will be observed during the next semester. The priority of government is stopping unemployment. There are no means to invest drastically in the healthcare system. For example, in the public budget of France 21, you were anticipating a reduction of spending for the hospital of 2 million euros. So in effect, in order to sustain part-time employment, to sustain subsidy to firms, credit to small, medium-sized enterprises, in the sense, the priority of the next budget in France is not health. It is the compensation of the drastic underemployment caused by the very ad hoc and a little bit clumsy policy of confinement of national economy. And of course, another victim of the COVID is environment. Now, in France, the parliament has been relaxing the constraints on ecological pharmaceutical products has been authorized again at the cost of disparition of bees and deterioration of propagation of precious soil health. So again, in order to act to the severity of the slump, economic slump, you relax the project of the grid economy, and you understand all the theories. So in the sense, the short-termism is again prevailing upon the long-termism, which is prerequisite for the anthropogenetic model to be successful. Let me, I progressively go to the conclusion. Then regulation theory has been analyzing both the continuities and the novelty and the bifurcation. And what is very important in this crisis is that in the past, the structural crises were revealing the erosion of the past response. The surprise of the COVID-19 is that de facto is strengthening the ongoing trends observed during the last decade. Let me show you some evidence. Of course, you have a drastic, quite all the components of GDP are affected. Consumption is much more frugal. People are saving as crazy because they don't know what is the future about. The investment immediately stopped because when you have radical uncertainty, the only investment you do is in digital capital, platform economy, or health. You have very few sectors you are confident in. For example, the normal car industry before the electric car is collapsing. So it is very difficult to find new way. Of course, you have the project of having hydrogen-driven airplane, but it is a long-term project. So collapse of investment. Public expenditure is constrained by the fact that the state is not spending so much, but compensating the losses of firms and also. And social security is under severe security because you relax the contribution to social security in order to prevent the bankruptcy of firms. And of course, the international relations are changed because the people realize that most of the medicines were manufactured in India or in China. So the new pattern is try to repatriate, to relocate essential products in order to prevent the scarcity, which has been dramatic in terms of mass chemical products and maybe in the future. So you cannot go back to the old system. This is impossible, whatever the dream. And what is very important, the digital capitalism is overwhelmingly powerful. And I think you have a minimum 5 reasons. First, why people have not been starving and dying by lack of food, because e-commerce has been able to provide a very efficient allocation of essential products everywhere in the world. And second, teleworking has maintained the capacity to produce some services and products without going in densely populated enterprise or transport. So, second element that is very important, the digitalization and the dematerialization of goods and services, typical of the knowledge-based capitalism, have been very instrumental in order to thrive into the pandemic. Second element, the GAFAM, that is to say, of course, Google, Alphabet, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft networks crossing frontiers. And the novelty is in the following: in spite of protectionist temptation, the transnational platform capitalists have been maintaining a form of trade in order to limit the threat of the total collapse of the internal trade. Third element, you have an incredible cash flow accumulated in the GAFAM, in the sense that they have no debt, they are very prosperous, and they are seen by the traders in Wall Street or elsewhere in the world, in some sense, as firms of the future. So they have not any problem of financing, at the opposite of traditional firms, which are facing credit rationing, because in the long term, the bankers they could be bankrupt by lack of demand. Fourth and definite advantage, using generating each day billions, trillions of data. They have been used, they have been able, GAFAM, and especially mobile phone companies, to trace the mobility of people, to trace by credit card analysis the standing on a real time. In this sense, they have been mastering the strategic information that the state were unable to have, given the fact that payment of taxes is only by semester. So in a sense, you have lagging national state statistics, whereas you have up-to-date analysis of the trends by GAFAM. And information is power. In a sense, the most efficient software in order to trace COVID has not been the one invented in France, but has been the one proposed by Google and Facebook. Last but not least, networks are monitoring the social mobility. And if you want, for example, to have a control of the diffusion of virus, the network created by GAFAM can be very instrumental to overrun the threat of diffusion of the virus. So imagine this firm as at the core of the play out of the crisis. And this is a wonderful counterexample to the idea that they should have been put under the constraint of by state. On the contrary, they are monopoly, but they thrive because they provide the essential system, the essential process for the system to survive. And here it's a favorite theme of regulation theory, where is not any technological determinism, because you can find three variants of this platform capitalism. The first one is the American one. Everything is commodified. You have, by definition, commodification of all of the goods, concentration of capital, and shift from salariat to precariat. In the sense, you are converting wage earner into commercial trader selling their workforce. And this model is very unequal, very unbalanced. It is concentrating wealth and political influence on a very few hands of people, and then you have a threat for democracy. Let's go now to panoptic control society, and this is the case of China. In China, the new economy is used as a source of social control. Under the name of social credit, each citizen in China is allocated evaluation of his respectable rules, work rules, traffic rules, payment, regular payment, and so on. So, in a sense, the political power is using this for controlling individual, and since they control individual, they can easily add another software that is tracing the evolution of the virus. So in a sense, you plug the control of the virus as another attribute of people, and therefore Chinese are being very efficient in tracing, whereas more democratic countries like France have been unable to trace by lack of the analytical tool to do so, and the lack of acceptation by people, their infringement of their liberty. Then you have the third ideal and potential model, which is the European one. Data should be the equivalent of the commons, in the sense of Eleanor Ostrom. In the sense that just the citizen via the state could control the use, and therefore this data on, for example, disease should be monitored by a public agency in charge of the public good and not making profit or defending the present structure of the political power and so on. In order of a very scientific way. You understand again the interest of the issue of hierarchy. In the case of US, the key actors are large companies of the platform economy. They control both individuals, firms, and governments. And by their control of governments, they can pass law that impedes them to be breaking down because, after all, they are monopoly and there are anti-monopoly laws, but they are not applied. Why? Because the strength of Facebook is such that de facto Facebook is controlling much more state than state are controlling Facebook. Then, what is the leading actor? The party state of the Communist Party, which is using all data in order to control population and to stimulate the dynamism of firms. Clearly, the big victim of this is the citizen. The citizen is the victim of a drastic control. By contrast, and this is, alas, a very notional model, in the case of Europe, we pass law in order to defend the fact that any information given by individual is their own property and they should own the right to monitor and control the use. So there are laws channeling the private use of data. Therefore, in this system, citizens are the king or the queen, and firms and state to be the servant. But as you know, the difficulty of this model, we have a wonderful regulation, but we don't have the equivalent of GAFAM. Because remember that in China, you had two companies, Alibaba, Baidu, and Tencent, what are the strict equivalent of the platform capitalism. We are lacking this, which makes this third model only potential because we don't have the productive capacity to implement it. Therefore, the second idea, and it is a very dialectical one, because you should remember that at the origin, all the regulationists have been reading carefully maps. Why state is so present? I already mentioned you have radical uncertainty, and one of the rare actors able to contradict this is the state by putting clock announcement, by socializing anticipation. But state is also the insurer of last resort. You had a systemic crisis. Nobody could, not any single private insurance could cover the cost of COVID. Therefore, state is the expression of society-wide solidarity. Third, the state is the defense of the right of citizens against the asymmetric power of big multinationals. So it has a kind of nationalistic, protectionist, and in some bad case, xenophobist thing. It is why outside China and US, you have, especially in Europe, many state-led forms of co-configuration. Go to Turkey, Hungary, Russia, Brazil. Clearly, you have populist state-led society, and this is the strict reaction to the overwhelming power of transnational. And therefore, you have an everyday struggle between the two worlds, which explains that you don't have any convergence toward the city model, but now you are in the mid of a struggle of two conflicting visions, one run by transnationalization, as implied by by Marx in The Capital. So capital is transcending borders, and as a reaction, political elite, some political elite try on the contrary to defend the domestic social links, and this struggle will last long in the present. I will not develop this element because time is elapsing, and I have to hurry up and maybe to go past some of the diagrams. Final element, you have an alliance between GAFAM and financial markets. here is the share of Stanley and Poor's 500 stock market index. As you see, you have ups and downs. You have ups with the so-called internet bubble. Then you have a new collapse with the world financial crisis in the US finance led. And then observe that you have an acceleration, and with COVID, an incredible acceleration. 22% of the value, total stock value in New York is about Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, and Facebook. So imagine this. And what is very impressive, everybody is pleased by the recovery of the stock market in New York. But observe, it is only new information and communication technology. The traditional economy, pure stagnation. The global recovery is up uniquely to this end. In some cases, it might be a bubble, because if US does not is not winning the struggle, the fight against the COVID, it will be unable to generate the profit in the productive sector that would sustain in the long run the stock market appreciation. So partially, this is a new phase in speculation, which show that de facto the control of finance has been very imperfect. Finance continues to run many other countries. Then the central message for the institutionalists, and there are many of them in the Japanese Society of Political Economy, with the following: we need a Karl Polanyi moment, in the sense you have to re-embed economic into society, and let me go quickly in this direction. First, there is not any hope of return to a so-called golden age. So the idea that you have a V-recovery, you have a long-term equilibrium, you have a bad depression, and then you compensate, is totally over. All World Bank, IMF, OECD, all the people, all the experts have been abandoned. No, we are facing a totally long process of adjustment, no return to the future. But why the problem is so difficult? Because the confinement, the freezing of the economy has been totally paralyzing the convention. For example, since you stop the free buying, you cannot, when we are confined, you cannot go to cinema, to travel, to theaters, to buy books, and so on. So you have a forced saving. When you progressively open again the economy, you have two possible trajectories. The first one, what was contemplated during one moment, was the people have been so frustrated that we will compensate by an extra consumption, the lack of consumption during 5 or 6 weeks. So it would have been generated inflation. Look, now it is totally the opposite. Since people now fear high unemployment, you have less consumption, therefore you have less investment, job losses, and you have the so-called saving paradox of Keynes. The saving is high because people are fearful of the future, and since the future manifests as bad, you have a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you understand, you cannot imagine to return to the past. You have to fight against radical assumptions. Simultaneously, you remember you had very distant value chain. The same product was supposed to be made in the world. We have been crossing maybe 15 times the borders. If you have a drastic freezing of large part of the system, you are not sure that the value chain can be operating when the economy recovers. So second uncertainty is the long-run resilience of the value chain that has been forged during the globalization period. And you understand, again, this is a totally obscure for firms. Firms will realize that their subcontractor has been bankrupt, and therefore the process is, given the high specialization of some product, can be stopped. And of course, the fate of a recovery would be a recovery of productivity. And if you look carefully, you have totally contradictory evolution of productivity. If you put physical distancing for restaurants, for theater, for movie theaters, it is divided by 2, for instance, the value created. So loss of productivity. But imagine I'm in the sector of the manufacturing software for education, for teleworking, for conference organization. I can observe incredible rate of productivity. And you have in between, and of course, you have another element, all the traditional sector, traditional engine for car or airplane, traditional airplanes, you have a complete collapse. Therefore, one of the core results of my analysis is that macro data do not mean anything because you have booming sectors on one side and booming at 10% a year. And you have the sector decreasing at 30% a year. And in between, for example, foods being following the long-term trend. So you have a collapse of an aggregate analysis of macroeconomic, and this is very important. Therefore, the task of the economists is the following: to create new virtuous cycles. You remember the first vicious circle I mentioned in the early beginning of my presentation: reduction of mobility, drop of transport activity, collapse of aeronautical production, unemployment, reduction of consumption. You have to create the same mechanism at reverse. One sector is giving demand to other, which create income that can be used to other sector, which fulfill the productive capacity created by the energy sector. And on this issue, we need absolutely to make heterogeneous agent-based modeling and to use Designan theory. Maybe some firms cannot produce because they are non-competitive, so their costs are too high, but most of them, lack of demand, they would be competitive if demand were normal. So you have a and some of other have been destroying their capital. There are no more rental capital in order to fulfill the demand. So you have Keynesian, classical, and Marshall economics in order to take the wording by this one theory. Last but not least, the long run rate of growth is lower than before. Not only it will take 1 or 3 years to recover the peak of the production, but the long-term trend over the decade will be inferior by lack of investment during 2, 3, or 4 years. So again, one accident in the short run is having a dramatic influence in the very long run. Therefore, it is totally naive to imagine, like the new classical macroeconomics, that one day the people will awake very happy and we will go back to the ex-ante equilibrium was waiting for them. This equilibrium is not existing. It has to be constructed by the actors themselves. And last but not least, planning is again fashionable in France, because we should, but be careful. It is very difficult to plan. Planning is difficult because you have booming sector, stagnating sector, and sector collapsing. A totally different framework, a little bit similar to the case of war economy, but we are not at war. We are struggling against the virus and not making it work. And last but not least, I think it is very difficult to get social compromise because clearly, given the same policy, consumer might gain from low interest rate because they can go to credit. Savers can observe a stagnation of their income. What about welfare? The people having welfare benefit, but some of people pay for this welfare, and there are some of them have neat benefits, over at net losses, and therefore you have a polarization. So, and for example, in contemporary society, rich tend not to be ready to pay more for the compensating the poor. Second element of openness. I'm in a sector highly competitive and exposed to the competition of foreigners. I may lose my job, but importing back from China low price goods of the same sector might be very beneficial to the consumers. And last but not least, a major difference in the crisis, you own your house. Given the speculation around the real estate, you are very happy, you are more wealthy, and you are tenant, you cannot have a decent lodging in city. And due to the density of the dwelling, maybe you are extending the diffusion of the COVID. So you have a divided self, which makes division. And of course, the more important is that in most of society, for example, if you look at a survey in UK about Brexit, in the American presidential election, in France, in Germany, you have two groups: national identity conservative, internationalist progressive. And on any side, they do oppose. And the drama is that they are 48-52 or 52-48, which explains the big uncertainty of the present American presidential election. You don't have any more a median voter that should be pleased by a little more or redistribution or a little less. You have two conflicting blocks because they have absolute preferences that contradict one another. And last and dramatically, in the case of France, people do not have any confiance anymore in central government. They only trust hospital and mayors, that is to say, the leader of small communities. Therefore, political intermediation has been made more and more difficult. It's time for me to go to the conclusion because time is elapsing very quickly. You see, regulationist methodology is not dead. All regulationists might die quite soon, but the methodology may remain, and let me explain why. First, everybody was speaking about globalization. Globalization of goods, globalization of productive investment, of financial capital, of property, intellectual property rights, international tourism and immigration. The virus tells us, be careful. The quicker and faster transnationalization is transnationalization of the virus. It took less than 3 months for the world to be totally contaminated by the virus. And we should call for a new public good, what would be, or a common, worldwide health sanitary security. And it should be implemented via a total reconfiguration of the World Health Organization. So clearly, globalization is here, and not only by climate change, of course. Climate change is again, you should create a new agency in order to capture all the strategy, all the investment, all the transfer in order to. Second, logically, we should observe the end of the domination of finance. Finance is impeding the way out of the crisis by thinking that all the information in the market, by being too impatient, it is preventing the unfolding of the time necessary to try to find medicines and vaccines in order to control the pandemic. Third lesson, and it is very important for nationalists, the best anti-uncertainty, anti-risk is the building of institutions that, taking back the lesson for past epidemic of crisis, are building institution, processes, interventions, subsidies, and vision models in order to cope with the next radical uncertainty. And this is the grand lesson of Asian economies, such as Taiwan, Korea, and even continental China, whatever one might think about the legitimacy of structuralism. If not, you have to improvise and you have to pour money to compensate terms, whereas had you a wonderful strategy of detecting, tracing, and isolating, you don't need at all to subsidize bankrupt firms. So clearly you understand that you improvise in a hurry because you have not been careful enough in inventing new institutions. The fourth point is technical, but I was very pleased by a paper in the New York Times by Paul Krugman. He has been pointing out that the model of epidemiologists were as imprecise, as inaccurate as the new classical macro model of macroeconomists. So what is very impressive, politicians have been trusting the expertise of epidemiologists, biologists, whereas they had not the theory and the correct modeling of what's happening. And the big drama is now they have been saying it is science. Science has been falsified by the biologists and technologists knew the past epidemic, but not the present one. And now you have a huge distrust of public opinion, both of government, who has been taking bad decisions, and science does not exist. They have been telling us lies about the mask, about medicine, and so on. And this, again, is a very drastic warning. Be careful. Science, and especially the economics, is not sophisticated enough to be trusted totally. So the doubt is a good thing before deciding very things which are of dramatic consequence, more health or less or more mortality. Fifth result, again, the concept of hierarchy, of institution, of contemporality. The severity of the crisis is the gap between the requirement of the period. The time, the leading time of politicians should be that of the pandemic, whereas it is still the time of stock market speculation. And again, only a political implementation and re-institutionalization of finance as part of society should be the solution. We recognize the theme of the passbook published in 2011. Last mechanism, we are living the coexistence of at least three forms of capitalism, a transnational one based on GAFAM, a state-led one most extreme in China, largely autonomous, and then defensive state-led capitalism. And we are here to last because none of them will triumph and will struggle in the very long term. Final teaching, you have to re-embed the economy into society, and I've been too brief in the last 7 parts of my presentation, but it is a wonderful research agenda for young people to investigate. Here, I will conclude by 2 scenarios because we do not have any reason to have a determinist vision of the way out of the crisis. It is a strong divergence with standard mainstream economics. They think that there is an equilibrium easy to be reached. No, this equilibrium will depend upon the strategic interaction of actors. And then the most likely scenario is a quasi-nightmare. It is a dystopia. And you can look at United States. It could be the good example of a dystopia. First, you have an intensive competition and explosion of inequality. You have an unprecedented concentration of wealth, unprecedented concentration of inequality with respect to humanity. So clearly, you have unleashed capitalism leads to the monopoly of capital. Second element, you have why GAFA are so effective, because they can deploy at the world level increasable return to scale, which explains why dynamic growing so fastly. Increasing return to scale has been exhausted in the 4G sector. They are very present in this sector. And it is why they are invading all the world and make it more unequal between nations and among nations, between the producer and the consumer of this device. Advanced in biology. Clearly, the project of augmented humanity in the Silicon Valley is to have productive, personal, preventive, participatory medicine. In a sense, you use digital information in order to imply a panoptic control of the society via technology. And last but not least, state is so dependent from financiers in order to finance the pediatric campaign, in order to have the formation of the spread of the public debt and so on, that de facto you have a huge investment in the public health, and you have an incredible instability of the macroeconomic dynamic, which you have a digital and geopolitical panopticon, in the sense, the name of Benson, in the fact that numerical are controlling and making acceptable a very unequal society. So you have first a social polarization without precedent. And we will see during the presidential election in the US how conflicting this might be. Then you have clearly the concentration between abstract good and traditional good, with the primacy of production of digital goods. You have, of course, abandonment of the concept of society. It is the famous Thatcher motto, where is no society? Because all these people are totally individualized, serialized, and it is very preoccupying for democracy. And of course, the big victim is democracy. This system will probably collapse by its own contradiction. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 decades ahead, you could imagine the following scenario. First, you have a dislocation of the international relation, which make a multiplication of national-based, relatively autonomous experience. Then you experience the failure of biological determinism in the favor of the idea that individuals are socialized, and they are socialized within a social welfare state. Last, but importantly, you have the idea that you recreate society around the issue of solidarity. And therefore, in this new world, in the long run, you have totally new institutions, a really World Trade Organization, a World Climate Organization, a return to the Keynes plan for the FME, in the sense that the dollar or the yuan are not the core reserve currency. They are an abstract and multilateral currency. You have an office for international migration in order to pacify the world economy and make possible the thriving of national experiments of various brands of social welfare. You have then the possibility to have the victory of the anthropogenetic model, because in this case, profit is no more a pyramid. Profit is a method for allocating efficiently the provision of goods that fulfill the well-being of population. Last but not least, if people are well educated, they learn how to be critical, not to think that Earth is flat, as 35% Americans think. You have a possibility to have very critical, very aware, very clever citizens who are building the pillar of the democracy. The youngest participant of this assembly will probably know, but unfortunately, it's not the case of the older. It was my real pleasure to provide you with this conference. I thank in advance the moderator and the commentator. I'm very sad not to be here along with you, but you know, the virus is spreading. The situation in France is catastrophic. And for me, it is a pity not to be along with you, but I hope someday we can again have the ability to exchange face to face and to have wonderful parties after any of our presentations. Thanks so much for your patience, and I'm eager to receive by email or by video conference all your comments. You are welcome. Bye bye, and thank you very much to the Japanese Society of Political Economy. Good afternoon.